Good evening, everyone. It's great to see crowd. It's sort of like, okay, we passed the bill, and we're still doing marriage forums, all right. But there's a lot, I think, of information that we do need to be sharing about it. And I'm going to first talk a little bit about, I was asked to do two things. We're going to talk, one, a little bit about how we think we got this passed, and then why I think it was so important that we did so. You know, it wasn't that long ago that we just passed civil unions, right? It was in 2011, so it wasn't a whole long time ago, and there's no way we were even close to having the votes at that point to be able to pass marriage equality, full marriage equality. We got civil unions done, but there was no way there was, and a lot changed, I think, between now, then and now that sort of enabled it. And the most compelling, I think, some of the most compelling factors were, I want to talk about those a little bit. You know, first I just got to say, you know, so the first state that passed this was Massachusetts. That's in 2004. Massachusetts passed it. Now, I just think this is a very telling commentary that before 2004, the Boston Red Sox had not won a World Series since 1918, okay? Now, since they passed marriage equality, the Boston Red Sox have won three World Series, okay? So now I'm saying that maybe as Cubs fans, and maybe some of us here, have some reason to hope, but I think it's time that we get it here. Because, you know, all good things come to the states who do the things that are right. So I'm sort of hopeful and optimistic in that regard. But, you know, I think one of the things that when I had talked to my colleagues in terms of when we passed the civil unions to how we got this done now, first and foremost, really, I heard from a lot, particularly the African American caucus, mindset shifting because of what President Obama did. And him coming out and supporting it just really changed the tenor of the debate, and I think really changed people's minds and hearts. I can tell you, I had a number of people tell me specifically that of my colleagues, that they listened very carefully when he came out supporting it, and people who had before said they would never do anything other than civil unions, that they would never be able to support marriage. That was just enormously powerful, I think. And it can be easy to forget that in the grand scheme because things have been happening so quickly, but that was something that a lot of people in my caucus came back to and spoke to me one-on-one about. Not that they would say it publicly so much, but one-on-one conversations, just how much that matters to them. A second thing was just really sort of how much public attitudes have shifted around this issue. And the hard part about that has been educating and letting our legislators understand and realize just how much their constituents' views were changing on this. We did a number of things. We did polling in targeted districts where we believed the senators and reps districts, constituents supported it, where they didn't seem to understand that. And almost in every occasion that was clearly the case. We had one person who voted it even though, and wanted it pulled in this district, even though we knew it probably would be supported in that district, and that was the case. That was the only one, and that was a very far downstate district, in fact, the furthest downstate district where somebody voted to support the marriage bill was this legislator. But pretty much unanimously, every district we polled, folks were supporting it, and that was a real shift. Now, the challenge had been that still what they were getting in their offices and hearing one-on-one tended to be more negative than positive. I mean, people who are anti-things tend to get more, or can be more riled up about expressing that, and it was a very organized group on the other side. So letting people understand that was important, and then that comes to the real third thing that I think really changes the equation, and that's where it was an all-hands-on-deck environment. And there were just such amazing advocacy done around this, and so many organizations, ACLU, Lambda Legal, and just, you know, widespread groups, Equality Illinois, the Civil Rights Agenda. I mean, you can go on and on about how many folks were out there organizing on-the-ground efforts to do it. And that wasn't, it was needed in the Senate, it was critical in the House in really getting it done there. And then what I would also just say, it's leadership. I mean, in the Senate president really set a tone from the beginning that he wanted it passed, put the stake in the ground that we were going to vote on it at a certain date, and made it happen. And I have to say, there was nothing I've been more proud of my caucus on the way they managed this vote. And the nature of the debate on the floor was generally very uplifting. I would tell you, you know, before we were going out to the floor to vote on this bill, the Senate President. We frequently have caucuses, and it's in the Senate President Cullerton's office. And so 40 of us are crammed in there. Well, excuse me, at this point, it was, yeah, no, it was about that. And you need 30 votes to pass the bill. We had, and I knew we had 32 Democrats and 1 Republican who were voting it. That's the way our roll call was. But he wanted to go through and have everybody within the caucus do the roll call to make sure that's really where we were. Don't want any surprises on the floor. We did that. We have our 32. And then he did something really surprising. He stood up and said, okay, we have more than we need. Does anybody want to back out? We don't need this many, so if somebody's concerned that it may hurt them in their district, we can do it. I'm looking at like, John, what are you talking about? Stop it. We want as strong a vote as we can. It helps us over in the House. And he very much said, well, no, but we don't want any surprises on the floor. If people are going to back out, do it now and tell us that. And one of my colleagues literally said, going, gone, and nobody wanted to back out. Everybody felt great about their vote. We had to go back and redo it when they had tweaked it in the House and come back, and nobody changed their votes on it. And despite the fact that I think there were people who were concerned it may hurt them in their elections, they didn't care because they knew it was the right thing. And that was really the tone and tenor throughout. And I think what really helped sort of change people's minds, not just those factors I talked about, was the compelling story so many people shared on why it mattered. And we've been living with civil unions and understanding why that's just not the same. And we look at somebody now who's working for Kelly Cassidy right now is, we luckily got to get married even before the date. We've gotten a court case since that for health reasons, if something's going on, you can in fact get married before the June 1st start date of this, and they have compelling health reasons. Her partner got cancer and does not have a huge life expectancy at this point. So they got dispensation. The court enabled them to get married now. And for so many reasons, civil unions are the same. You want to be able to express your love. You want to be able to actually get all the benefits that come with it, not have to pay the state taxes, be able to file jointly. I mean, there's just so many things that come along with marriage, and really primarily the expression of your love and the dignity. In the first couple of years of having civil unions, you should know, we have about 400,000 people in the last census identified LGBT in Illinois. About 38,000 couples. And since 2011, we've had 6,100 civil unions enacted, and and that's just since through May of 2013 when we got the data. We're expecting, estimates are that it's going to be about, someplace like 11,000 within the first 3 years of this bill going to pass marriages, which is a huge amount of the couples that we have, which I think is just incredibly heartwarming. And we estimate that it's over $100 million that we're going to get in the wedding business in Illinois from this. It's an awesome, very good thing. So I'm hoping everybody here who does not already goes out and falls in love so you can actually get married. So it's really nothing that's felt better under the dome than getting this bill passed. So I'm really thrilled to be able to be here tonight and talk a little bit about that. And now I think I'm turning it over to Kelly. And just to say, that things always have their dynamics. We had our bumps in the Senate passing this. We'd hoped to do it actually in November the year before. We passed this almost a year ago on Valentine's Day in 2013. We'd hoped to do it in November. The vote was closer then because we won a lot of elections after that. But some of the folks weren't there. One person was a yes vote. Her mama died, so she couldn't be there. Another yes vote was out of the country, couldn't come back. We just didn't have our votes actually there present. Things like that happen. And it was incredibly disappointing, and I know I had to live through that, not sleeping for months till we actually finally got it back on the table and voting. Because there's nothing, when you're voting on something that matters to people, where it makes a difference to their personal lives, I mean, there's just nothing more, heart-wrenching than when things go wrong. And I know in the House, so we passed it then, and then it was just so disappointing, I know, when in May, by the end of the session, we had to be able to get it done. And I can tell you there's nobody felt it and wore it harder than Kelly, with the possible exception of Greg Harris, the lead sponsor. And for Kelly, it's really personal too. She got engaged the night we passed it in the Senate. She and her partner got engaged in Springfield. So it's very personal as well. And it matters a lot doing it. And I can just tell you, Kelly, I can't tell you how many thousands of miles she put on her car, crisscrossing Illinois, meeting with all of her colleagues wherever they were over the summer to flip their votes to yeses so that we could come back and veto and get it done. So true kudos to Kelly for all of her efforts on that. So come on.
To Heather's point about, we pass it and we're still having forums, I thought the only conversations I'd be having about marriage were planning my wedding, which we are trying to do. So, but it is great to be here, and it's kind of nice. It's a little bit of a victory lap, and it's wonderful to have an opportunity to answer folks' questions and get a chance to share what happened, how we got here, and what it ultimately means. I will say also to Heather's point about David being an activist on this since the beginning. We share a funny little bit of history many years ago when I worked in the state's attorney's office. When the mayor of San Francisco started doing weddings, David wanted to as well. And we were looking into what was going to happen and how it would work. And that's actually when I met the woman I am going to marry. Was in a meeting with David about what would happen if we started doing marriages in Cook County, because Kelly Quinn worked for him at the time. We went our separate ways, didn't see each other for 15 years, and here we are now planning a wedding. So we do come full circle. In my floor speech, and I'm supposed to talk about this from the perspective of an activist and a legislator, and in my floor speech I talked about this as being deeply personal. So many of the bills we vote on, and we take thousands of votes every session, and very often there's not a face to go with what you're voting on, and very often it's very nebulous what the impact of our votes are going to be, and it's rare that there is a person associated with a bill, much less a person that you have to sit next to every day. And in my floor speech, I talked about that, and I talked about my children who come with me to Springfield and spend time with my colleagues, and who spend time with people who say terrible things about gay families, and they have to say that knowing that they have also said to me that my boys are beautiful, well-behaved, lovely young men. And so, if nothing else, this was perhaps one of the first times that everybody in that room knew someone who was affected by that vote, and the truth of their actions was right in front of them. That said, it makes it a little difficult now that we're going back into session with a lot of work undone. I mean, my greatest fear with passing this bill was that many of us were going to decide the to-do list was done. And we're not done. We are far from done. We weren't successful in our efforts to pass a comprehensive bullying bill in the state of Illinois. We don't have suitable protections for kids in our schools. Our trans brothers and sisters are not suitably protected under the laws of our state. We've got a lot left to do. And so for all of you who were part of the folks that made Heather and I the single largest number of contacts on this bill, our districts had the greatest turnout in terms of legislative contacts. I love y'all for that. We're not done. So please stick with us on this. But working on this bill and driving across the state and sitting and sharing, as Ed said, very bad food with many of my colleagues in some of the more glamorous corners of our state, gave me an opportunity to do something that I don't often get to do and they didn't often get to do, which was to hear what they really wanted to know and to hear their real questions and give them an opportunity to truly understand what my life is like in my family and what our families are like. And for some, it changed their votes. For some, it cemented their votes. And for some, it gave them a second chance to think. And maybe we'll get them the next time because, as I said, we aren't done. But this has been an incredible experience. I mean, I came in right after civil unions were passed, and I was able to participate in that first civil union ceremony in Millennium Park, and it was this amazing way to begin my legislative career, and to have done this so quickly and to have seen how our community rallied. I mean, the incredible outpouring. I mean, the 5,000 legislative contacts within my district alone. I'm sure you were more than that because you have double the district and you have Greg's district on the other end, so we certainly have the highest concentration. But the rally, the March on Springfield and the rally and the energy from that, I've told folks that felt like the cavalry had arrived at a time when our energy was kind of low. We really needed that, and really the joy in the chamber and in the building that day, and it was beautifully juxtaposed the next day with the anti-rally and the negative energy that they brought. There was a huge contrast, and it was amazing. And those things made a difference. I mean, listening to my colleagues talk about even that contrast, it was interesting to hear some folks talk about that. Oh gosh, you guys were all so happy. You're so glum today. You were in the rain and the sun's shining, and they're all grumpy. Yes, they are. You know, so it was a fabulous experience, and we're there. But I want to encourage folks to not be done, to ensure that we can complete the rest of the agenda, that we can stand with the folks who stood with us, and that we can make sure that we can move forward and get the rest of our work accomplished. I think David has some of the practicalities to share with us. I'm looking forward to bringing my license application to David very soon.
I think that's great. Kelly's a great person. I'm the other Kelly Quinn, that worked with me. Listening to Heather and Kelly, all I can think of is, see what happens when you send two strong women to the legislature. It's amazing, and we need more of it. A couple of introductory things before we talk about some of the specifics of June 1st, or perhaps sooner. I just want to say how proud I am of both of you, Ed, Joe, and others, and the community. Because all these years, I look at it from a different perspective. Remember, I was first elected way back in 1979. And in 1979, fortunately, when I first ran, I had the support of the gay and lesbian community. But when I look at 1979 to today, and I'm not trying to downplay at all the suffering so many have gone through, the people beaten up in the alleys and the police brutality, all sorts of things. But it's nice in this world when many of us seek social justice and it's hard to get. Now that's a long time, 35 years. But in 1979, when it was very difficult to talk about these things, very little support anywhere. And then you see what happens. And not just the fact that these legislators could accomplish this amazing goal. And I think there's a good chance that the courts would have done anyway, but now we see what the courts are doing. That's great too, but it's the cultural change. When you're involved in life and politics and you see injustice around you, and then you see all of a sudden people's minds changing. I mean, these old bigots still trying to wave the nasty flag, and all these young people, what's the problem? It really is great. And so not to diminish, there's so much more to be done. But from the old horse's perspective here, I like to find the good side of things, and looking at how far we've come is really nice. Now just on a few practical things. And I have some papers passed out, and one of them has some of the most important questions that people ask. Now first, and Heather made reference to it, as you know, the court has said that individual cases now can come forward and we can grant them licenses if they have life-threatening situation. And frankly, that's up to the doctor, and so far there's been 5 such couples that have come forward. And I do believe that there'll be quite a few before then. Now the other part, and maybe Ed will talk more about this, is that as you know, and I think it's up tomorrow in court, but all of our friends are pushing hard to say, wait a second, if this should be the law of the land, equality marriage, why do we have to wait to June 1st? And so, maybe not the greatest news for our office. It'd be great for us. We sent in a motion in support of that, and I hope the court acts promptly and moves up that date. That'll be a challenge for our office, but that's our problem. We'll do it. So the point is, if the court doesn't move more quickly on that, June 1st will be the big day. And one other little interesting thing in the law, which some of you may know, is that the county clerk is the only clerk in Illinois that can legally marry people. I don't even know why the law's in there, but that's what it is. Maybe the other clerks didn't want it. So the nice thing for me, as soon as that comes, I will be able to also conduct ceremonies. So I'm looking forward to that. So June 1st will be a great occasion. And what that means, and we'll work on this a little bit. So June 1st is the date unless Ed and others are successful in pushing the law sooner. Now that means on June 1st, people can start getting their licenses, okay? And the law simply in Illinois is that you get your license. It's good for 60 days, so if you get it June 1st, you've got 60 days to get married officially and perform a ceremony if you so choose to. It means that there's a 24-hour waiting period. So even though June 1st is a Sunday, we will of course be open on June 1st. It will be, I'm sure, a very interesting celebratory event. So June 1st, you can get your license. So if you're really in a hurry, that means on Monday, June 2nd, you can actually get married. Okay, so that's the plan right now, unless of course those dates are moved up. Now there's something special, and just so you know, it's a simple thing to do. You do have to come in person. You can't do it online. Some of you are asking on that. You come in person, both of you, and all you really do is you bring identification. They ask you a few questions, and when it comes to actually getting that license, you can come downtown at any one of our 5 suburban offices if you happen to live, in Skokie, for example. So it's easy to do. You come and get that license. We also want to tell you that there's also commemorative certificates. Some people, gay, straight, anybody, like these commemorative things that we put on the wall, either because of they're proud of their first child or they're proud of their marriage. Those are available too. We have things in the back. But there's also something that, Brandon Deese, as many of you know, Brandon was my chief of staff for, seems like forever. And with Brandon's encouragement in some years, we also have these little wallet certificates, which is very helpful to have, particularly in times of crisis, because now, because of equal marriage, now, you can actually, protect your spouse in the hospital or whatever it may be. So if you're interested in those wallet size certificates, that's an easy thing to get too. So the important thing is, we talked about civil unions. Now the good news, I'm sorry?
You're talking about converting?
Yes, okay, so to the civil unions now. Okay, in the wisdom, thank the legislature and their legal supporters, it says for those roughly 4,000 in Cook County and more than 6,000 Heather mentioned across the state, if you have an existing civil union, okay, you don't have to pay nothing. Okay, so when you come in, your license is free. Okay, but there's something else that's important. If you choose to, and you have a civil union, you can in fact say, you know what, I'm not even going to have a ceremony, but what I'm going to do is the date I got the civil union, that's going to be the date of our marriage. Now for some of you, may have got your civil union license a couple of years ago. So that's really personal, but it may help out with certain practical or health, other kinds of things. So the bottom line is, you have that option if you have the civil union license. Let's see, that I'm not going to talk about all the celebratory things, except it'll be very exciting, as it was back in civil union time. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. We have a sheet back there to look at. I'm trying to think of anything else. I know we're going to let Ed speak and then get to questions.
If you're married elsewhere.
Oh, well, that's very important too. Thank you. Gail works with me. If you're married elsewhere, it's good in Illinois. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that. It's good in Illinois. You don't have to do anything extra again. So there's lots of little details that we can leave for those questions. But our office is excited about getting ready. And again, June 1st, unless it's sooner. And keep that in mind that you have those options if you already have a civil union. Otherwise, everything you do will be the same as anybody else. Okay? Your desire to get a marriage license will be the same as anybody else. You have a 24-hour waiting period, 60-day license. If you don't have the civil union license, you pay the same as everybody else, which is about $60, which is not too expensive. So we're really excited about it. I'm hopefully going to see a lot of you. And now we're going to hear from a legal expert of the ACLU, did a wonderful job on this, along with Lambda Legal, is not here tonight, but we can never say enough about all they did. Not only what they did legally up front, but all the behind the scenes work over the years. So Ed?
So I do want to talk a little bit about how we're going to try to make David's office work at a date before June 1st and be open. But I did just want to bring up just one quick thing, because Heather talked about how public opinion had changed. And I think that in some ways explained what Kelly was describing too, that in some ways the way that opinion has changed is sort of the journey that we saw many legislators take over the last several years. I've been looking at focus groups and polling on LGBT recognition, for relationship recognition for 15 or 20 years. The most surprising number I ever saw was this year. And it came when we polled Republican districts. And we would get a majority, a slight majority in these districts, you know, maybe mostly affluent suburban districts, where if you looked at the total voting population, there was a slight majority. Republican voters still tended to be split fairly evenly. But the amazing thing was, about 84% in these districts believed that marriage was inevitable. We've won. We've won this debate. Our opponents, these are just the last vestiges of opposition that we're seeing. It is over. This we'll fight hard in states going along, but we have won this debate. So let me talk about the good news in terms of maybe winning a bit sooner. For reasons that are legislative and constitutional and have to do with the way in which our state operates, if you pass a bill after the May 31st deadline, unless you have a supermajority in both houses, that bill cannot become effective until June 1st of the following year. So because the marriage bill, the marriage law met all of those requirements, its effective date is June 1st. Lambda Legal and the ACLU, as soon as that became clear, sort of looked at two different questions. The first question was what we do, as you've heard, about people who are facing life-threatening illness. It didn't feel like much of a victory to us if, in fact, people didn't make it until June 1st, and so they never got the opportunity to marry. And so we thought it was important, and in cases where we knew in particular, to go in and ask the federal court to order the clerk, in this case, Mr. Orr, to issue a marriage license. Let me just say, I wish all of our defendants were David Orr. Because litigation, it turns out, is a lot easier when there's no opposition. Just a little tip for those of you who ever practice law or are interested. It turns out if the other side doesn't fight, it's kind of easy to get things done. After we were able to secure the first few licenses for people who were being threatened, we were able to then reach an agreement with the clerk's office about the procedure that was discussed, where a physician can fill out an affidavit, file it with the clerk's office, and you can get a license tomorrow. But one of the things that still was troubling us was we continue to think this is a fundamental right. In fact, it turns out courts in Utah and Oklahoma think this is a fundamental right. And it didn't make any sense to us, frankly, that if it is a fundamental right, if the public policy of Illinois has changed, if it is an accepted notion that this is where the state of Illinois is going, why should we wait for these 6 months? Because there's a whole range of people who may or may not have an illness, but may have some other familial situation or something else that will come up in that period of time, where being married really matters. And so what we have asked the federal court to do is to simply issue an order allowing the clerk to begin issuing licenses as soon as that order is made. That matter has been fully briefed, as they say. There is a motion for summary judgment which has been filed. Again, it's the beauty of the thing. There's nobody in opposition to it. And the judge is expected to rule at any time. And it is not out of the realm of possibility that within the next few weeks or days, we could get that order and Mr. Orr's office could become suddenly very, very busy. And we'd all feel bad for him, but it would be a really wonderful thing. Now, the limitation on this is it's only Cook County. And so our friends and neighbors and colleagues and others who maybe don't live in Cook County or relatives who don't could travel to Cook County to be married if that's what they needed to do. I think there are other things that we might look at down the road if we were able to be successful in terms of getting this ruling in terms of Cook County. We also know that Cook County is the most populous county in the state, and it is the one that really matters in terms of I forget what the percentage of marriages is each year that your office, or marriage licenses that your office issues as compared to others. We looked at this at one point. Yeah, over 60%. So, that process is moving forward. There are a couple of other things that I just want to say, just in general, and I think some of this will come up in the, the question and answer period as well. Everybody's circumstance is still going to be different. Every couple's circumstance will still be different and individual. And you may still want to consult with your lawyer to talk to, say if somebody handled your, if you have children and handled an adoption, things of that nature, to think through all of those questions before you decide which path is best for you in terms of either converting your civil union to a marriage or getting married, or deciding precisely what steps you want to take. We are still in a little bit of a morass in terms of, for example, if you ever thought you might be transferred to another state, a state that didn't recognize marriage, you may move somewhere where your Illinois marriage would no longer be recognized for those states' purposes, although clearly for federal purposes. But that might make a difference in terms of, children and parentage and things of those nature, or questions of those kind. Those things will all be individual, and I think that they are things that, everyone will have to ask themselves, and everyone will have to sort of consult and figure out on an individual basis before they decide what to do. But I think we are at the moment, where we are going to see, if not sooner in June, the kinds of photos on the front of the newspaper that we've all wanted to see, which is, people being able to marry the person they've loved and been with, sometimes for years and decades. And that's a really wonderful thing. One last thing, because the question I think often comes up in these settings, and the question is, will there be a possibility, for example, down the road of the law and therefore the marriages being challenged? The short answer to that is I think it is highly unlikely to the point of being non-existent. I don't think we'll ever see the state of Illinois walk this law back. And the truth is that our opponents are focused now on another part of their, sort of on the next step of this is, that they are literally out, and we hear this every day, they are literally out recruiting florists and bakeries and others to deny you all service. And if they do, please call us. Because, that is a fight we want to have. The notion, as I think my friend Jim Bennett from Lambda so eloquently stated, that the trade-off for marriage is to right discrimination and permit discrimination under our Human Rights Act is simply something that none of us can tolerate. And we are ready to take on those cases, because the notion that you can simply suddenly declare which part of the Human Rights Act you agree with and which part you don't, and when you're going to and when you're not, there's a word for that. It's called chaos. And we simply can't permit that under our laws. So anyway, thank you all very much, and congratulations and thank you to all of you.
If we could have one more hand for our speakers, Senator Heather Steans, State Representative Tony Cassidy, County Clerk, and ACLU. And I also want to thank the folks at Equality Illinois were very helpful in helping us set up this event. Unfortunately, they weren't able to send a representative, but they were a huge help, as well as the other organizations that for years and decades have been pushing these issues forward, and then the people in this room, outside of this room, folks who are no longer with us, who have been responsible for pushing this forward. I think we should give those folks a round of applause as well. And so now we can open it up for questions, and we'll try to keep them. If you could identify maybe who you'd like to answer it. So.
Go ahead.
And then you.
Well, just very briefly, I'm almost 70 years old. We've been together almost 28 years old. I never thought I would be at a meeting like this. My thanks, and I'm sure everyone else here, to everyone up front and those who couldn't make it tonight for everything you've done. Thank you.
Actually, anyone that can answer this would be great. Our civil union was August 10th of 2013. Let's say that even if it's June 1st of this year, what happens for federal benefits for us to file taxes? Do we wait and file an extension since we can go back and say that August 10th was our actual marriage? Or do we just file separately this year and in 2014 we file together?
I've got the beginnings of an answer. Yeah. I have what I think is the beginnings of an answer, and that is that I think the closest analog that we can find to this is some of what happened with the couples who were caught in the switches on Prop 8 in California, who were married and then kind of not married, and then the Supreme Court finally said they were married. What we understand the IRS is permitting is for those couples to file amended returns going back to their marriage date. I'm sure a tax consultant, and I am not one, can tell you better. But my understanding is that if you simply transfer or convert your civil union to a wedding, you have that date as your actual wedding date, you can file amended returns to get all of the tax benefits of filing jointly for whatever number of tax years it ends up being that reaches back to reach that date.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
So along the same lines, if we got married in Canada in 2003, in the eyes of the state of Illinois, you've been married since 2003?
No, I think the U.S. Treasury came out with a statement on this, and I think it's 3 years back that you can do it.
Okay.
Unless you've done some things, and in some cases you can go to 4 years, but, or, you know, if you've been filed for stuff, but I think it's 3 years back you're allowed to go. And the U.S. Treasury has issued a statement on this, so we can get you those details.
And that statement should be on my website.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've uploaded a lot of that stuff.
Thank you.
Here.
Yes, in the back.
Yeah, but I was just a little bit more clarity about that question. I mean, because I didn't know if it was completely answered. Does that mean, because she asked, should she wait? Should they just file should they wait before they do anything nationally? For the federal taxes, because you can file joint state for sure.
I think the best advice, in particular for your situation, because you're sort of caught in switches, is to get professional advice on what your best bet would be. Because your individual situation should be looked at very specifically.
Go ahead, please. Can I get a little bit of clarity on the piece about the clergy, the religious? So if your church has not yet progressed to that point where they're talking about marriages between two people, but the state has given us permission if we're in good standing to do marriages, how does that work?
So essentially, just as the Catholic Church does not have to marry people who have been divorced, this law allows religious organizations and members of the clergy to hold to their faith. So what this law allows is a civil marriage to everyone, and the opportunity for religious organizations to conduct marriages in accordance with their faith. So the best parallel I can give you is that just as the Catholic Church cannot be compelled to marry two people who have had a divorce, they also can't be compelled to marry two people of the same gender, since that is outside the tenets of the Catholic faith.
Yeah, the question is not about being compelled, the question is about wanting to do the marriage.
But that kind of depends on the religion. So, for example, yesterday I was meeting with a clergy woman from a Methodist faith. And for them, it's done, if they, she herself wanted to perform them. But you have to get, your own church has to, in that case, under the Methodist rubric, they had to get dispensation because their overall does not support marriage equality, but they can get reconciliation and approval for them to not be in that same path, and that they can do it. But they had to go through the process to do that in their church, which they have, and now she can perform them in the church. She was already performing before that could happen outside of it, but she can't. So it really depends. Different faiths handle this in very different ways. Did that answer your question in terms of individual?
It does. Within our church, the Presbyterian Church, there are folks that are open to doing the wedding ceremonies, marriages for same-sex couples, and the question we have is, if we do this, and even though our larger body doesn't is not completely in agreement, is divided about it, if we do them here in Illinois, will they be?
It's recognized because they're still getting the marriage. They still have to go through getting a license from their county clerk, and it's totally recognized. Correct. Isn't that what you would say too? Yeah.
Yeah, as long as they have the county clerks.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
And I have a Presbyterian minister who performs that myself as a cousin, and she has been for a long time, but she's had to do it outside of her church. Now she can do it in her church. She's very excited.
I'm the pastor at Rogers Park Presbyterian Church, so I'm happy to talk to anybody.
I just had a quick question, and I know this is probably more of a federal question, but in regard to consulate and immigration requirements, if somebody is a foreign national here on a visa, and it's valid when you get married, and then they overstay their visa, and then they're conflicting with the federal law. And this may be something that's going to come up with the new federal immigration reform, but
You stumped the DJ.
Yeah.
So this has been perplexing for some of my clients who want to get married, but I'm counseling against it because you don't want them to get deported. And then what validity is the marriage in Illinois going to have on the national level?
It does for all federal benefits now, or most federal benefits. I'm sorry. A marriage in Illinois will be recognized for all federal benefits, post the Windsor decision. And one of the things is that ICE has now issued a whole new series of regulations. There was even the kind of the interesting story of the immigration lawyer who had a couple in front, or a partner in front of an ICE judge on the day of the Windsor hearing. He literally had a clerk wait until the decision came down, download it, and run it over to the immigration court, and they stayed the deportation. So I think that ICE has begun to come out with a whole series of new regs. They are clearly recognizing these marriages now. And I think we'll see a lot fewer deportations of families in this way moving forward.
Please.
I have a question. My partner and I did the civil union in June of 2011, and at that time, I did not change my name. And I made a promise that when marriages became available, I would change my name. Is that something you can do simply at the same time you convert the civil union to a marriage?
Without a conflict of interest.
I wish it was, but I think any change of name, you gotta go through the state of Illinois. So I'd encourage you to start that soon, so it doesn't stall you. There's a procedure to follow. Just call our office, okay, and we can tell you the details. Sometimes they're a little slow and behind, so if you've got plenty of time, it'll be fine. If, on the other hand, there's a rush in somewhere, let us know. We'll try and push Springfield bureaucracy, but you want to get that taken care of. And just on that point, lots of people don't realize that nowadays, you get the middle initial wrong, you're not gonna get through the screen at the airport. So think about all that, but any change of names, very important, start now and get it taken care of.
I have a question in regards to that. From what I heard, if it's not a legal marriage, it's like $400 or $500 to get your name changed. So,
No, first of all, to get your name changed on any document that you choose, it's not that expensive at all.
okay.
Okay, unless you're talking to some lawyer for something else.
It's just people that I know that have had civil unions prior to the marriage, that they had to pay a huge fee to get their name changed, their partner's name, because they weren't legally married.
I'm sorry, Gail,
Give me an opinion, after civil unions passed, that, when you have a civil union or you have a marriage, it's if you're in form 3 names.
Okay.
And, but it's very important for you to get copies of your marriage license so that you can show the Social Security office, show your, insurer at work, show your bank, and that's where these, pocket certificates that David mentioned really come in handy, because even though you're entitled to that free name change, as in everything else, you're going to have to assert yourself.
But then that would say that you would do it after you get married, for instance, rather than before.
Well, it is upon marriage. I don't know.
See, that's the free name change. Yeah, so that's the free part is when you're married, when it's legal and not just a civil union.
No, it can apply to civil unions actually as well.
I didn't do it then, so now, yeah.
My view is always to try and get a name change, start working on it now. Again, it's not expensive to get a name change or stay on that.
Will all employers have to recognize marriages in terms of healthcare benefits, or will religious institutions be able to opt out?
Well, there's our Alderman. There you go. Ed, did you have a question?
Yes. So, first of all, any entity, let me just say this, any non-religious entity, let me just start with this piece, that offers benefits to married couples or to the spouses of employees, will have to offer them to the spouses, even if those spouses are same-sex spouses. So that, in that sense, you'll have full family coverage, and those couples will be covered. The religious thing, I will tell you, if you're following the papers, is not only a little sticky, not just on this question, but it's getting stickier because what is a religious institution? The truth is, you could never compel a church or someone like that to recognize a union or a marriage that they don't sanctify. And if they don't sanctify it, they don't recognize it, they don't have to provide the benefits. The question is, what is a religious institution? Is it a university that draws all kinds of federal funds, that draws all kinds of public, that benefits entirely from, public funds and is subject to all kinds of governmental scrutiny and control other than that? Is it a hospital that in the same way, benefits from all of these things? And right down to, is it a private business that just simply says, as Hobby Lobby has, for example, that they don't want to provide certain kind of health care for their employees, because apparently the owners of Hobby Lobby know whether women need birth control more than women do. And I understand that. Because I've heard Rush Limbaugh talk about birth control, and he seems to know a lot more about it than I do. But the only point I'm making is, the general rule would be, unless it is a church, an actual entity that is related to the advancement of the religious doctrine, they should have to provide those benefits. But I think those are the kinds of things we're going to end up, as I said before about some of these other private entities, I think those are the kinds of things we're going to end up fighting about over the next couple of years. Yeah.
I just want to add that because I spent way too many hours sitting negotiating the bill with people, representatives from the Archdiocese, and Land Olivo. Thank you, Land Olivo. They were just a godsend in all of this, in their fortitude on this, and the number of hours they spent. And we were very intentional about trying to make sure that we would not be excluding the, religiously affiliated hospitals and kinds of schools, those kinds of things, that would still have to be recognized in there. That's very much the way we were trying to do it. I can tell you that Archdiocese was not happy with the way the language ended up on this. But I do believe, as Ed said, that this is going to be litigated. I mean, I think it's going to be tested in the courts. I think we'll probably see cases on it, and that's ultimately the way we're going to find it. But certainly our intent has been to try to keep it protecting the way it does right now in the Human Rights Act, that, unless you're a church, you got to live by all the human rights requirements, which is you can't discriminate based on somebody's sexual preference. So that's very much the intent, and I think when Ed talked about our goal really of making sure we don't undo anything in the Human Rights Act, those are the kinds of issues we're trying to get at to make sure we're not undoing those. So I'm certainly hoping that's the way it ends up playing out if it gets to litigation.
I just want to say hi, and hopefully my absence was explained. Chicago tonight, yes. So you can see on a rebroadcast later on if you want. First of all, I'd like to thank my staff assistant, Bob Fuller, for filling in when I dumped this on him earlier today. Okay, you get to run the meeting, now you gotta go do a TV show. But I'm really glad to see so many people out here, and those of you who are planning to take advantage of this new law, congratulations. Congratulations, I'm very happy for you. It's very fitting that we're hosting this meeting on the actual birthday of Martin Luther King. I think he would have been born in 1927, so that would make him 87 years old now. Right? Am I doing the math right? Yeah. And I also want to really, I don't need to tell you how fortunate we are to have these three elected officials right here. Heather Steans, the lead sponsor in the Senate, Kelly Cassidy, one of the lead sponsors in the House of Representatives, and someone who will take full advantage of this law, and David Orr, who has been a lifetime champion for human rights and civil rights, who you couldn't ask for a better person to be in the office that's going to be in charge of marriage licenses. So, I want to thank them all with joining me in hosting this event tonight, and I hope you find this very useful and helpful. And then finally, a longtime friend of mine, Ed Yohnka from the American Civil Liberties Union. Without the ACLU, we would not be where we are today. So thank you, Ed, and thank you to your organization.
There's a question back here. Yeah, so are there any additional protections that we would need in terms of healthcare decisions if my partner and I were married and we're traveling to a state that doesn't allow it or doesn't recognize, or another country? What are some of the things that we should consider doing so that that's a non-issue?
First of all, the travel issue is a big one, and the pocket protector was the word that was coming out of my mouth. The pocket protector. It will be useful, but honestly, until the whole world recognizes in the same way that the wallet certificates, but until it is assumed that every couple is just a couple, having those additional layers of protection will be useful. The durable power of attorney for healthcare and carrying those things with. When I spoke on the floor, I talked about having to leave Springfield at 4 o'clock in the morning because Kelly was being rushed to the hospital, and calculating the additional time it would take to get home to get the power of attorney, and what it, whether I was, sort of the risk and benefit of having that piece of paper or not. I travel with my kids' adoption papers. The second parent adoption papers. So, until the world really, really changes, you're gonna want all of that stuff, and you're gonna wanna make sure your estate documents are in order, and you're gonna wanna do all of those things. You know, it's not a magic bullet. It's a great thing, but we do need to make sure that we've covered all of our bases. And in particular, if you're talking about traveling and depending on the places you're traveling, having that documentation with you is still gonna be important. But, Ed, do you have anything to add to
No,
that?
I think that's exactly what we would say. I think, you know, especially if you're spending a lot of time, let's just be honest, in the South, you know, you may want to think about having those documents with you.
Yeah, my family's in Florida. I now leave them there. There are copies down there. Because I was afraid I was gonna leave without them at one point.
My only note was, I think we heard David Orr suggest that he can perform marriages. So I thought that was an advertisement of services, so hopefully people take note.
And I don't charge.
June 1st, right here.
Now hold for reception.
I'm not sure if the dance studio is your first choice for venues, but.
Well, you know how the Unification Church does these mass marriages? I think it'd be really cool to do one here.
I'd like to thank everyone for showing up tonight, your great questions, all your hard work, and for our speakers, thank you very much. And also note that CAN TV as well as Representative Cassidy's office have been recording this tonight. And so your friends, your neighbors, relatives can see this online shortly and also on CAN TV and at Representative Cassidy's YouTube page as well.
And Bob, when we get the information when it's going to be broadcast on CAN TV, we'll, if everyone's signed in tonight, we'll make sure we send you out an email about it. Yeah, we'll just send it out to the entire ward.
And really, there's a lot of the information that folks asked about is on my website. We've got a section on marriage on my website with that treasury guidance, with the information on the emergency licenses, all that stuff. We've just been sort of aggregating it there so that folks have access to it. So you can find some resources there if you think of questions later.
Thank you, everybody.